There's a particular kind of ache that doesn't scream it, just hums quietly beneath the surface of your life. You feel it when you lie awake, staring at the ceiling long after the messages you sent go unanswered. You feel it in the silence after you give, and receive nothing but absence in return. And yet, you stay, you wait, you hope. Because for reasons you can't quite explain, you keep loving people who offer you so little. It begins subtly, a flutter of excitement when they finally notice you, a warm rush when they give you just a flicker of attention. It's like the sun peeking through after a long winter brief, unreliable, but enough to make you believe that love is coming. You tell yourself to be patient, to understand their wounds, to love harder. Maybe if you're soft enough, generous enough, patient enough, they'll love you back. You don't realize it yet, but this is not the first time you've lived this cycle, and it won't be the last unless you stop. Why does your heart open so easily to people who give you nothing? What part of you thinks this kind of love is safe, is familiar? You may have mistaken stillness for security. You may have confused emptiness for space thinking. If there's room for you to work harder, love deeper, prove your worth, then maybe love will finally come. But what you're chasing is not love. It's recognition. It's healing. It's a need that began long before this person entered your life. And here is the ache. It's not just about them. It never was. It's about something in you that believes love must be earned, must be fought for. That being chosen is the reward for your pain. And so, you fall into the arms of people who won't hold you. You whisper truths to people who don't listen. You hope for softness from people made of stone. This isn't foolishness. This isn't weakness. This is the language your soul learned when you were too young to know better. You were trained to accept the crumbs, to find meaning in the void, to believe that silence means try harder. You fell in love with effort. But Carl Jung might gently tell you, this is the shadow at work, the disowned part of you, the hurt inner child, seeking the same wound again and again, because it believes if the ending can change, then maybe the pain never happened. You're not really loving them. You're loving the fantasy of healing through them. Here is your first insight. The people who give you nothing feel familiar because, once, someone you loved made you feel like nothing, and now, your heart seeks them out not to suffer, but to finally win, to finally be enough. This recognition stings. It reveals how much of your pain is a loop, but in that sting is a doorway. You can't exit a pattern you haven't named, and now you've named it. So the question becomes, can you sit with that ache without running back to the empty hands that keep wounding you? Can you stop mid-chase and ask what part of me believes this is all I deserve? What if the ache isn't a sign to try harder, but a sign to turn inward? You are not here to be emptied. You are not here to chase ghosts. You are here to remember that love is not pain, and your worth is not earned by convincing someone to choose you. For now, breathe. Let the ache surface, and do not fear it. That ache is not your enemy. It's your messenger. It's asking, softly, are you ready to stop loving people who give you nothing? You don't remember the exact moment the script was written, but your soul does, somewhere in the pages of your early life. A line was quietly etched into your story. Love is not freely given, it must be earned. And since then, you've been acting out that silent sentence, again and again, on every stage of your heart. Think back, not just with your mind, but with your body. Do you remember the feeling of waiting for someone to notice your sadness, of hoping someone would hold you, but instead being told to stop crying, to be strong, to be quiet? Those moments aren't just memories, they're roots, and they grow silently beneath your relationships, feeding the way you bond, long before logic arrives. Carl Jung taught us that we are shaped most deeply by what we cannot see. The unconscious, those hidden wounds, unmet needs, and silent hopes steers us without asking. So, if you wonder why you're drawn to people who don't give back, start here. Who was the first person who didn't give you what you needed? You weren't wrong to want love. You weren't weak to crave comfort. But if the ones who were meant to love you couldn't meet those needs, your young heart began adapting. It learned to suppress, to perform, to wait. You began to confuse love with anxiety, affection with attention, connection with survival. You learned that if you became small enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, you might be loved. But the tragedy is that these early patterns don't stay in the past. They echo, loudly. They echo in the people you chase today. The ones who ignore your texts. The ones who show up only when it's convenient. The ones who withhold just enough to keep you hungry. This isn't just bad luck. It's a magnetic pull, the wounded child in you seeking out someone familiar. Someone who will finally choose you the way that first person didn't. If you can get them to love you, then maybe the old pain disappears. Maybe the echo finally quiets. But it never works that way. Because the healing doesn't come from finally being chosen. It comes from seeing the pattern and choosing yourself. The truth is, you're not falling for people, you're falling for unfinished business. You're drawn to their silence because it sounds like home. You feel urgency around them, not because they're right for you, but because your nervous system is still stuck in the past, trying to correct the uncorrectable. So ask yourself, when you feel panic over their absence, who are you really missing? When you bend yourself to be lovable, who are you really trying to impress? When you ache for someone emotionally unavailable, are you loving them? Or are you searching for the parent, the caretaker, the figure who once withheld love? This is not about blame. This is about awareness. And with awareness comes liberation. Because once you recognize that the pain didn't start with the person you're currently fixated on, once you see that it is a much older echo, you stop giving strangers the power to reopen your oldest wounds. You stop handing your heart to people just because their silence feels familiar. Here lies your transformation. You don't need to rewrite the past by reenacting it. You don't need to prove your worth by enduring more of what already broke you. You are allowed to want something different, and you are allowed to walk away, even if your inner child is still waiting at the door. The healing begins when you realize you are not the same helpless being anymore. You can offer yourself the love you never received. You can soothe your own ache. You can say, I see you, I believe you, you are worthy. Not because someone finally stayed, but because you are. Let this be your moment to pause, to reflect. What would it feel like to stop chasing the echo? What would it feel like to listen to the silence, not as an invitation to run toward it, but as a chance to finally walk the other way? There is something inside you waiting for your attention, something brave, something soft, something whole. It's the part of you that's tired of performing. It's the part that's quietly whispering, we can choose differently now. So listen, and let that voice grow louder than the echo. You don't love them, you seek something through them, something intangible, ancient, almost sacred approval. That intoxicating sense that if this person finally turns toward you, chooses you, validates you, then maybe you are real, maybe you finally matter. It's not a conscious pursuit. You don't wake up saying, let me chase someone who doesn't care. But somewhere, deep beneath the layers of your awareness, something compels you to try. You find yourself performing without even knowing it, saying what they might like to hear, becoming a little smaller, a little more agreeable, a little more impressive. You rearrange your identity like furniture, hoping the layout will finally make them stay. But they never do, and still, you try harder. Carl Jung called this a kind of split within the psyche. The part of you that knows your worth is fighting the part of you that still doesn't believe it. And that conflict plays out as over-efforting. You push and give and bend and serve, hoping the right gesture will unlock the door to their heart. But this is not love. This is bargaining with ghosts. The ghost of approval is not just a metaphor. It is the haunting memory of all the times you felt invisible, and the unconscious vow you made to never feel that powerless again. So you decided, if I just become everything they need, they won't leave. If I earn their love, maybe I'll never feel that old abandonment again. But approval is a drug with no lasting high. It fades fast. The moment someone gives you a taste, your heart races, but the emptiness returns even faster, because what you're seeking can't be given by another. It must be reclaimed by you. Still, it's hard to stop. You may not even realize how much of your love is entangled with proving. You may believe you're being generous, when in truth, you're hoping they'll finally say the words you longed to hear as a child. You're enough. You're good. You matter. And it's not just romantic. This pattern shows up everywhere, in the way you overextend at work, in how you tolerate friends who drain you, in how you silence your truth to keep the peace. Every place you abandon yourself is a place where the ghost of approval still lingers. But here is the truth Jung would want you to face. You cannot heal the past by reenacting it. You cannot win love by becoming who someone else wants you to be. Because each time you shapeshift to earn affection, you lose the thread of your true self. That self, the real you, is still in there, still waiting, still wondering, will I ever be loved for who I truly am, not who I pretend to be? So pause, breathe, reflect. Can you remember the last time you felt safe enough to stop performing? Can you imagine what it would feel like to say, I no longer need to convince anyone of my worth? The moment you stop chasing approval is the moment your true healing begins. Because then, and only then, do you begin to love not from fear, but from freedom, not from a need to be validated, but from the fullness of self-recognition. This is the transformation, the turning point, the soft rebellion against every voice that once made you feel you weren't enough, and it won't come from their affection. It will come from your refusal to betray yourself any longer. So ask yourself gently, who are you when you're not trying to be liked? What would it feel like to be loved by someone who sees your soul, not your performance? And most importantly, can you be that someone for yourself? Because the real love you're chasing is not someone else's approval, it's your own. And once you begin to give that to yourself, consistently and tenderly, something radical begins to shift. You stop running, you stop performing, you begin to rest. And in that rest, something holy unfolds, the ghost disappears, and in its place stands you whole, worthy, already enough. It's in the quiet moments, the in-between spaces, where the truth begins to whisper, not when the person texts you back, not when they say the perfect thing, but when they vanish, when they don't show up, when the silence presses against your chest like a stone, and you find yourself spiraling into stories. You wonder what you did wrong. You retrace your words, your tone, the timing of your last message. You twist yourself into a question mark, aching to find the right answer to a mystery that was never yours to solve. But beneath the mental noise, something deeper stirs, a memory not of them, but of you, of the parts of you you've tried to forget. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the aspects of yourself you've rejected, repressed, or disowned because they were once labeled unlovable. These are not always dark qualities. Often, they are the softest, most tender fragments, your neediness, your longing, your fear of being left. You buried them because someone made you believe they were too much. So now, when someone gives you nothing, it's not just their silence you feel. It's the echo of every moment your needs were ignored. The wound reopens, and your shadow begins to dance not to punish you, but to be seen. You chase unavailable people not because you love the pain, but because your shadow is trying to speak, and the silence they give you becomes the stage where your abandoned self finally emerges, craving acknowledgement. But instead of listening, you often react. You overtext, overthink, overoffer. You try to fix what's not broken in you, but broken in them. Because doing so distracts you from facing what's really happening, your own disowned needs rising like fog. There's nothing shameful about this, nothing weak. Your shadow is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It shows up in relationships to reveal what you've yet to love within yourself. You feel devastated when they don't reply. That's not about them. That's your longing, asking to be witnessed. You feel unworthy when they withdraw. That's your inner child, remembering the first time love was paired with absence. You feel small, invisible, discarded. That's your shadow asking to come home. Here lies your invitation not to silence the ache, but to understand it, to become curious, to turn inward and say, what part of me have I been running from? This is not easy work. It's far simpler to blame them, to call them emotionally unavailable, avoidant, cold, and maybe they are. But the deeper transformation happens when you stop focusing on their behavior and start asking why you stayed. Why did you hope their silence would transform into love? Why does your nervous system feel alive when affection is withheld? Because on some level, the chaos feels familiar, and familiarity feels like safety even when it's not. But you're not a child anymore. You're not powerless. You don't have to abandon yourself to be loved. You don't have to reject your shadow to be accepted. You can reclaim the very parts of you that were once shamed. You begin by sitting with your need, not judging it. You breathe through the anxiety, not escaping it. You meet your fear with compassion, not critique, and slowly. The shadow that once ruled you from the dark begins to integrate into your light. Imagine what it would feel like to stop fearing your own longing, to no longer panic when someone withdraws, to no longer feel small when someone ignores you. Imagine being so whole that silence doesn't trigger collapse but presence. That's the path of individuation, not perfection, not immunity from pain, but intimacy with your entire self, even the parts that once scared you. And as you reclaim your shadow, you stop needing people to play roles in your old drama. You stop auditioning for love. You stop handing your worth to those who cannot carry it. Because now, you see the dance, you recognize the pattern, and you choose not to step in. So breathe. When the silence comes again, and it will, don't fill it with fear. Sit with it. Listen to what arises. And remember, what you feel in their absence is not your brokenness. It is your shadow asking to be loved. Sometimes, the people you're drawn to aren't just emotionally unavailable, they're impossibly idealized. They seem ethereal, mysterious, larger than life. You place them high on a pedestal, not just because of who they are, but because of what they represent: a dream, a missing piece, a reflection of something within you that feels out of reach. Carl Jung called these inner projections the anima and the animus, the feminine and masculine energies within us all. When these archetypes remain unconscious, they often get projected onto others. You don't just fall in love with a person, you fall in love with a symbol, a soul mirror, a fantasy stitched from your deepest longings and unmet needs. And so, the unavailable lover becomes more than a person. They become a vessel, carrying all your hidden hopes, all your silent desires, all the qualities you secretly crave in yourself. You love them not for their presence, but for their mystery, not for their affection, but for the illusion that maybe, just maybe, they'll unlock something inside you that feels incomplete. But this projection creates a trap. The more unreachable they are, the more your longing intensifies, the more distant, the more divine. You confuse the high of the chase with depth. You tell yourself they're special, rare, worth the wait. And with each unanswered message, each distant glance, each emotional breadcrumb, they grow in power, and you shrink in self. You don't see them clearly. You see a version of them shaped by your inner world, by what you wish you were, by what you wish you had, by who you're still becoming. And here is the revelation when you fall for someone who gives you nothing. What you're often falling for is a part of yourself you've yet to integrate. The confident one, the calm one, the free one, the passionate, wild, emotionally whole one. They are a mirror of your unlived potential. But a mirror cannot hold you. A fantasy cannot love you. An ideal cannot meet you in the flesh. To keep chasing the unreachable is to keep abandoning your reality. To live in longing is to pause your becoming. You stand still, worshiping the image, instead of moving toward yourself. So pause. Ask, what do I see in them that I wish I could embody? Is it their freedom, their cool detachment, their power, their emotional distance that strangely feels like control? And now, ask something deeper. Can I reclaim those traits within myself? This is the turning point Jung described, when you recognize the anima or animus projection, and instead of feeding the fantasy, you pull it back into your own soul. You don't need them to be whole. You are not half a heart seeking completion. You are a full self, learning to remember your fullness. That wildness you admire, it's in you. That peace you crave, it's in you. That mystery you're addicted to, it's your own untapped depth. You no longer need to chase it in another. You need to welcome it home. This doesn't mean the people you love are illusions. It means your connection is layered. You may love them truly, but you may also be loving an idea of yourself reflected in them. And once you see this, you stop waiting for their attention to feel alive. You stop needing their presence to feel worthy. You become your own mirror, your own ideal, your own inner beloved. It's a slow shift. Yes, a gentle unraveling of fantasy. But with each step, you return to yourself, not with force, but with reverence. You look in the mirror and say, I don't need to chase the unreachable. I am what I've been longing for. And then the spell breaks. And in its place stands something quieter, softer, more real. You. There's a moment, often quiet and unspoken, when you realize you weren't really in love with them. You were in love with the version of them that lived in your mind, the one who could have loved you, should have loved you, might still love you if only you tried harder, waited longer, became better. That illusion is powerful. It's stitched together by longing and memory, stitched by hope. And in that illusion, you see not just a person, but a promise of belonging, of finally being enough. But that promise was never real. It was projected. Carl Jung warned us of projection, the unconscious act of placing our own traits, needs, and desires onto others, believing that they originate there. You believe they're distant because they're strong. You believe they're cold because they've been hurt. You tell yourself stories to protect the fantasy, but in truth, you've poured your unmet needs into them like water into sand, hoping it would turn into something solid. And the desert never changes. It only drinks you dry. So here you are, loving someone who gives you nothing. And all the while believing it's because they're special. But ask yourself, are you seeing them clearly? Or are you loving the idea of them, their potential, their imagined softness, their quiet mystery? Have you mistaken silence for depth? Have you confused emotional unavailability with power? You didn't fall for them. You fell for the dream they represent. It's so easy to love someone who gives nothing, because they give you space to build the fantasy. Every moment of their absence becomes a canvas for your imagination. Every half response becomes a sign to interpret. You assign meaning where there is none. You create love from air. But love, real love, is not a mirage. It does not live in the gaps or thrive on the chase. Love does not starve you. Love does not disappear when you speak your truth. So why do you stay? Because the fantasy is safer than facing the truth that you've spent so long trying to extract love from the unloving, because it keeps you from facing the terrifying question, what if no one ever gives it to you the way you want? And deeper still, what if you're afraid to receive it? Receiving love requires vulnerability. It requires surrendering the performance. It asks you to be fully seen without the mask, without the chase, without the story. And that kind of visibility can feel far more frightening than any rejection. So you return to the one who gives you nothing, because their emptiness allows you to stay in control. Their silence lets you script your own story. Their absence is a kind of emotional theater in which you are both playwright and audience. But the cost is your wholeness. The cost is your truth. Let yourself feel the grief of this realization. Let yourself mourn not just them, but the version of you that believed this was love. Let the tears come for the years you spent hoping someone would transform into the person you created in your mind. And then, slowly, breathe into the truth the person you were really searching for was always you. That part of you who longs for tenderness, who craves recognition, who aches to be chosen. That part is not weak. It is sacred. And it doesn't need projection to survive. It needs presence. So now, ask yourself, what did I place in them that belongs to me? Was it your joy, your tenderness, your passion, your hope? Call it back, gently, piece by piece. This is your soul returning to itself. This is the illusion unraveling. This is the truth stepping forward not to shame you, but to set you free. You no longer need to survive on projection. You no longer need to water deserts. You no longer need to build palaces from silence. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to demand clarity. You are allowed to say, if I have to guess whether I'm loved, I'm not. And in that moment of honesty, you reclaim something vital, your ability to see clearly. Because love is not found in the mirage. It's found in the mirror. You tell yourself you're fine, that you don't need much, that a little affection here and there is enough to keep you going. A single reply, a short call, a glance that says, maybe. You convince yourself that this is love, that your longing is a strength, that your hunger is a virtue. But beneath all those words is something quieter, more honest. Your soul is starving. This kind of starvation doesn't come from loneliness. It comes from being near something that looks like love, but doesn't nourish you. from investing yourself fully into someone who gives you barely enough to survive and calling that survival a relationship. You begin to live for the highs, the unexpected text, the accidental smile, the illusion of closeness. These moments feel like water in a desert. And so, you wait. You withhold your own needs, silence your voice, shrink your expectations because you fear that asking for more will drive them away. But they're already gone, or maybe they were never really there to begin with. Carl Jung would say, this is not just about another person. It's about your relationship with your own soul, the part of you that has been conditioned to equate deprivation with devotion, the part that finds meaning in emotional hunger because, somewhere along the way, it learned that suffering was the price of connection. And so, a strange addiction forms not to love itself, but to the hope of it. You become hooked on possibility. You stay in places where nothing grows, because something in you believes that one day, if you suffer beautifully enough, love will finally arrive. But it doesn't, and the longer you stay, the more your spirit begins to dim. Your joy wanes. Your creativity dries up. You stop recognizing yourself in the mirror, because love should water you, not weather you. This is not your fault. This pattern is ancient. It comes from a time when being ignored felt safer than being rejected, when keeping silent was the only way to stay close, when receiving a scrap of affection felt like a gift, not a wound. But now, your soul is tired. It's asking for more, not more of them, but more of you. Because here's the truth. Intensity is not intimacy. Obsession is not love. Starvation is not spiritual. You were not made to ache endlessly. You were made to be met. And to be met, you must first meet yourself. You must feed your soul not with breadcrumbs from others, but with the full banquet of your own presence. You must give yourself what you've been begging for: affection, validation, attention, safety. You must learn to say, I will not starve here, even if I have to eat alone. This isn't about rejecting others. It's about remembering yourself. It's about noticing when your stomach knots at the sound of their silence and asking why you're waiting for someone else to notice you when you haven't yet looked inward. Start gently. Ask, when was the last time I felt full? What relationships have truly nourished me? What do I keep calling love that feels more like survival? Let your answers rise slowly. They might sting, they might surprise you, but they will set you free. Because once you see the cycle of starvation, you can stop feeding it. You can choose to walk away from people who deplete you not with anger, but with grace. Not because you're bitter, but because you're blooming. Not because they're bad, but because your soul deserves to be fed. You begin to realize that love is not about suffering, that depth does not require pain, that wholeness does not come from being half seen. And in that realization, your body breathes, your heart opens, your soul begins to hum again, because finally, you are no longer starving. You are choosing to be full. You know that feeling when the person you love begins to swallow your world whole, not with force, but with the quiet pull of your own surrender. You give and give, not because it feels good, but because the thought of their absence feels unbearable. You lose track of your boundaries, your voice, your desires, and slowly, imperceptibly, you lose yourself. This is a silent kind of vanishing, not dramatic, not sudden. It's in the small sacrifices, the softened edges, the parts of you tuck away to avoid conflict or to earn affection. It's in saying yes when your heart whispers no, in waiting for their approval before you speak, in shrinking so they can take up more space. You may not realize how deep this runs. You tell yourself it's love, or loyalty, or patience, but what it really is a mask, a survival strategy born from fear of abandonment. You become so invested in their warmth that you forget to nurture your own. You become a shadow of yourself, waiting for someone to fill the emptiness you refuse to face alone. Carl Jung called this losing touch with your ego, the conscious sense of self that needs care, boundaries, and respect. When you pour yourself into someone who cannot reciprocate, your ego weakens. Your identity becomes entangled with their moods, their needs, their absence. And yet, you persist. Because what's more frightening than losing yourself is the thought of being alone. But here is the paradox. the more you lose yourself in others, the more isolated you become. Because you're not loved for who you truly are, you're loved for the version of you who conforms, who accommodates, who disappears. And that love, Jung reminds us, is not love at all. It is a shadow love, a counterfeit, a temporary illusion. The path forward is not in giving more, it's in reclaiming yourself. You must learn to say no, to rest, to protect your energy, to honor your truth, even when it means risking disapproval or loneliness. You are allowed to want relationships that nourish your soul, not drain it. You are allowed to want love that sees you fully, not just the parts you offer when you're most available or agreeable. This is the difficult work of individuation, coming home to yourself amidst the chaos of longing and loss. It requires courage to stand alone. It requires patience to rebuild from within. But it is the only way to break the cycle. Because when you choose yourself, when you fiercely guard your wholeness, something remarkable happens. The people who were once ghosts in your life begin to lose their hold. Their silence no longer shakes you. Their absence no longer defines you. You begin to attract those who love the fullness of your being, the light and the shadow, the joy and the ache, the strength and the vulnerability. And in that sacred space, you are finally free. Free to be you, whole, radiant, and unapologetically alive. So breathe, feel your edges, reclaim your voice, and remember, losing yourself to love is never the path to belonging. The real belonging begins with coming home. You've been wandering through a desert of longing, chasing shadows and echoes that never satisfy. But now, something inside you stirs a quiet voice, a deep knowing that whispers of a different way, a way back to yourself. This is the call of individuation, Jung's profound invitation to become whole, to claim the pieces of you that have been scattered, hidden, or forgotten. You are more than your wounds, more than your patterns, more than the love you didn't receive. Individuation is the process of gathering those fractured parts, the lost child, the shadow, the anima or animus, and weaving them into a tapestry of wholeness. It begins with awareness, with seeing yourself not as broken or lacking, but as a complex, evolving being who deserves care. It asks you to hold your pain without fleeing, to meet your loneliness without panic, to love your scars as much as your smiles. This is not an easy path. It asks you to be brave, to face the parts of yourself you once feared, to recognize how you have been giving your power away, hoping to find it in others, to realize that the love you sought from people who gave you nothing was actually an invitation to find your own love within. Ask yourself, what does it feel like to bring those lost parts home, to welcome your shadow as a teacher, not a threat, to honor your deepest needs without shame, to finally become the caretaker you once desperately needed. There will be resistance. The old patterns are comfortable, familiar, even if painful. Your nervous system may tremble at the thought of stepping into your own power, but each time you answer the call, you grow stronger. Each time you choose yourself over a hollow connection, you reclaim your soul. In this process, you discover a new kind of love, not dependent on others, but rooted in self-respect and presence. You learn to say yes to yourself first, and the rest of the world follows. The relationships that once felt like shadows begin to transform. They either evolve into authentic connections or gently fall away, making space for what truly serves your growth. The transformation isn't linear, it's a spiral. Sometimes you'll falter, sometimes you'll doubt, but the call remains steady. It's the heartbeat beneath the ache, the quiet revolution of your soul. And as you answer it, you awaken to a profound truth. The love you sought outside has always been inside. The love you were chasing is not a prize to win, but a gift to give yourself. So, breathe deeply. Feel the power rising in your chest. Step into your wholeness, piece by piece. The journey home is the greatest love story you will ever know. You arrive here, at a place both familiar and new, a crossroads where the ache of chasing emptiness meets the gentle clarity of choice. You see now that the people who gave you nothing were never the source of your worth. They were signposts, reflections of a deeper story, a story that begins and ends with you. This moment is a quiet revolution, not a loud rebellion, but a soft, steady turning inward. You stop asking the world for permission to exist. You stop bargaining your love for scraps. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Instead, you choose yourself. You choose to honor the ache not as a chain, but as a call. You choose to love the parts of you that once felt unlovable. You choose to see your shadows, your longings, your wounds not as weaknesses, but as doorways to wholeness. Carl Jung would remind you that this is the heart of individuation, becoming the person you were always meant to be by integrating every fragment of your being. It's a path that asks you to be your own lover, your own healer, your own home. What part of you are you ready to bring back from the wilderness? What voice inside you has been waiting to speak without fear? What love within you is ready to rise and fill the empty spaces left by those who never stayed? The transformation is subtle, but profound. You begin to notice how the world shifts when you stop chasing, how the weight in your chest lightens when you say no to false affection, how your breath deepens when you sit in your own presence without distraction. And in that stillness, a new love blooms, not the frantic, desperate kind, not the one built on absence or longing, but the kind that knows you are already enough, the kind that begins inside, ripples outward, and changes everything. The love you seek from others has been waiting within you all along. When you choose yourself, the world learns to love the real you. So, breathe. Let the quiet revolution take root. Let your soul rest in the fullness of its own light. And know this: you are whole, you are worthy, you are loved. Not because someone gave you something, but because you have chosen yourself. The love you seek is already within you. The slow breath of your soul invites you to rest now. Feel the steady rhythm beneath your thoughts, the gentle unfolding of peace that comes from choosing yourself. Let go of the chase, the ache, the longing. In this stillness, you are free. You are home. The world outside may still echo with absence, but within, you are full. You are held by your own tenderness, your own grace, your own unwavering love. So, as you close your eyes, let this truth sink deep into your being. You do not need anyone else's love to feel complete. You are whole already. You are enough. And in this knowing, you find the calm you've been seeking. The love you seek is already within you.